Hi there everybody, and welcome to my new series on this channel where I am going to pin two stocks against each other, analyze their fundamentals at the same time, and figure out which one I like the best to invest based on their fundamentals. And for this first episode, I am going to be pinning Microsoft against Apple, essentially the two biggest companies on the planet by market cap. We're going to pin them against each other, and we're going to see which of these two companies, based on their fundamentals, is worth buying today. So with that said, let's get started with this video. We're just gonna go straight into the calculator. On the left, we got Apple, and on the right, we got Microsoft. Apple coming in with a market cap of almost $3 billion at $2.8 trillion, and Microsoft coming in at almost $2.4 trillion. Similar PEs at around 30, Apple at 30.67 and Microsoft at 35.11. Both high, both very, very expensive just by this one metric. Next, we got the share price. We got Apple at $172.17 and Microsoft at $314.04. Now, are these prices high or very high? We're going to see later on if the assumptions made are somewhat close to these numbers, or are these numbers just extremely way off course. Next, we got the annual dividends, and they both do pay a dividend. Apple coming in at 88 cents and Microsoft coming in at $2.48. So when it comes to a dividend portfolio, you're already looking at Microsoft as the better dividend play, mainly because they pay more. However, here's the thing: how good are they able to give out this dividend? Well, turns out that the amounts paid in dividends every single year for Apple is around $14.5 billion, and Microsoft is at $18.6 billion. So similar amounts of dividends being paid out for both companies. However, in relationship to their 5-year free cash flow, Apple, after this dividend is paid out, has still $53.8 billion in the free cash flow, whereas Microsoft is about half, actually less than half, at $22 billion. The payout ratio in this case, in regards to the free cash for Apple, it is significantly healthier than that of Microsoft, because Apple is at 21.2, whereas Microsoft is at 45.81. Yes, both are still able to 100% give out their dividend. However, when it comes to dividend safety, Apple's is 100% able to pay out this dividend, and in fact actually has more room to grow than that of Microsoft. Next, we got the fundamentals. Starting off with the net income, we got Apple 48.4 billion to almost $95 billion, which is an increase of 73%. Microsoft, on the other hand, 25.5 billion to 61.3 billion, which is an increase of 96%. While Microsoft's increase is significantly higher than that of Apple's, understand that Apple's margins are significantly higher, where Apple's 1 year ago net income was almost $95 billion and Microsoft was only 61. So even though Microsoft's increase is significantly higher, Apple's has a lot more income than that of Microsoft. Next, we got the cash flow. And similar to that of the net income, we see that Apple is significantly beating Microsoft by margin. Apple 5 years ago, $51.8 billion to 1 year ago of almost $93 billion, which is an increase of 44% with an average 5-year free cash flow of $68 billion. Now, Microsoft went from $31.4 billion to $56.1 billion. Now, while that is a higher increase by percent, their average 5-year free cash flow is only $40.6 billion, where Apple's is almost $70 billion. So again, by this metric, yes, they do have higher increase by percent. However, by raw numbers, Apple's is significantly better than that of Microsoft. Next, we got the revenue. And as we can see, once again, Apple beats Microsoft, again, not by percent, but by numbers. And as we can see, 5 years ago, $230 billion to 1 year ago of $366 billion. That is an increase of 37.34%. Whereas Microsoft went from $96.5 billion to $168 billion, which is an increase of 42.55%. As I stated, yes, the percent is higher on Microsoft. However, the raw numbers are significantly higher in Apple. Next, we got the total debt. Now, Ironically enough, this is something that Microsoft is actually beating Apple in. So far, Apple has been beating Microsoft by a significant amount. However, not in this case. Apple, when it comes to total debt, $115.7 billion 5 years ago to $136.5 billion. That's an increase of 15%. Whereas Microsoft actually went from $95.5 billion in debt to $79 billion in debt, which is a decrease of 16%. So in this metric, Microsoft absolutely takes it. Next, we got the shares outstanding. And ironically enough, this metric is the one that Apple is beating Microsoft in, however, by percentage, not by shares. And as we can see right here, 5 years ago of 20.5 billion shares, whereas today they have 16.4 billion shares, which is a massive decrease of 24.83%. Now, Microsoft also went down a smaller percent. However, their total shares outstanding is significantly less than that of Apple's. Microsoft 5 years ago of 7.7 billion shares to 7.5 billion shares. So again, this is the inverse of what we saw when it came to their free cash flow, net income, and revenue. Whereas in those, Microsoft had the higher percent difference. However, their raw numbers by comparison to Apple were significantly lower. Here in this case, Apple has the higher decrease in percent. However, their numbers are significantly higher than that of Microsoft. So I would have to give this one to Microsoft just because of the raw numbers. And lastly, we got cash and equivalents. And as of today, Apple has almost $35 billion in cash and equivalents, whereas Microsoft has $19.2 billion in cash and equivalents, with an average cash and equivalents for Apple of $34 billion and Microsoft of $13 billion. So in this case, 100% Apple has more money on hand. Their average cash and equivalents is significantly higher than that of Microsoft. So this one definitely goes to Apple. Now, actually coming down here, we're going to make some assumptions, low, medium, and high. For all of them, I'm going to keep the required rate of return the same, and I'm going to assume the same growth assumption for both Microsoft and Apple, mainly because they are in the same sector, and I would like to see how they compare to each other if we were to invest in them, and doing so gives us a better understanding of which one would be the better buy. For the low assumption, when it comes to Apple, 10% growth rate, we get a target share price, not adjusting for debt, of $75.64. For Microsoft, doing the same, we get a target share price of $134.89. For the median assumption, assuming a growth rate of 15%, we get a target share price of Apple of $81.09, and for Microsoft, we get a target share price of $158.83. And for the high assumption, assuming a growth rate of 20%, for Apple, we get $86.85, and for Microsoft, we get $185.93. Adjusting for debt, for the low assumption, Apple, we get $77.77, and for Microsoft, we get $137.44. For Apple, median assumption, we get $83.22. For Microsoft, we get $161.38. And for the high assumption, for Apple, we get $88.98, and Microsoft, we get $188.48. Current share price, guys, is $172 for Apple. Assuming that you would just want to take a look at the target share prices after debt, let's not even take into account the margins of safety, but just take into account the target share price after debt. Apple's target share price is significantly closer to the actual share price than that of Microsoft. As you can see, for the low assumption, Apple is $94.40, whereas Microsoft is $176.60. Median assumption for Apple is $88.95. Microsoft is $152.66. And for the high assumption, we get a difference of $83.19, and for Microsoft, we get $125.56. So right now, as it stands, Apple's share price is significantly closer to our assumptions than that of Microsoft. So in this metric, Apple 100% wins. When it comes to the cash equivalents, by far, Apple 100% wins. When it comes to the shares outstanding, though, we have to give this one to Microsoft, mainly because of the fact that they just have significantly lower shares than that of Apple. However, Apple is decreasing it by a larger percent. For the total debt, this one, absolutely give it to Microsoft, because Apple is actually increasing their debt, whereas Microsoft is decreasing their debt. Revenue, we have to give this one to Apple, mainly because of the fact that by raw numbers, they're significantly having a higher revenue by raw numbers than that of Microsoft. When it comes to the cash flow, we have the same deal. Even though Microsoft has a higher increase in percent, Apple's free cash flow is significantly higher by raw numbers than that of Microsoft. And when it comes to the net income, we have the same deal. Even though Microsoft has a higher increase by percent, but Apple's raw numbers are significantly higher. And of course, looking at their dividend, well, we actually see that even though Apple's dividend is significantly lower, they are still left with significantly more money in their free cash flow than that of Microsoft, giving them a lower payout ratio. And just as a whole, when it comes to the PE, we see that Apple has a PE of 30.67, whereas Microsoft has a PE of 35. All in all, both companies are really solid. Both of them are awesome. However, in this case, just by these sheer facts, I'm gonna have to give this win to Apple, solely because of the fact that their metrics are significantly in the green, are more in the green than that of Microsoft. But that pretty much does it for this episode. If you like, comment, subscribe. It really does help her with the algorithm on YouTube. You can follow me on my new tech sites of BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble. In addition to my stock analysis videos and crypto videos, you will get exclusives as well. Alright, so with that said, peace out, and be on the lookout for the next stock analysis video and stock versus video.